course, there was some pushback of my last video. Of course, some was saying that I gave out some ill advice to my brother, Georgia. It's the way you feel, fine. But what a lot of people in our community is going to have to understand, you're going to have to get to the point to where you're going to have to learn how to separate the children and what's beneficial to them from the discompatibilities that you have with each other. Okay. And when I was coming up in Chicago, when my grandfather would come by, what I noticed about him, the relationship that everyone had with him, everyone would refer to him as Junior because my great-grandfather, James Kelly Sr., was his father. And he passed away, I believe it was like 6 months before I was physically born. So I never got a chance to meet him. Now, my grandfather, James Kelly Jr., who is my mother's father, those two didn't have a real good relationship. And so as I was coming up, when I was very, very young, I was told not to refer to him as grandfather, but to refer to him as Junior. And so by this being told to me, by me being so young, this was conditioned into my mind, unconsciously yet consciously. Unconsciously because I was too young to challenge that. Now, unconsciously, I was being programmed against referring to my grandfather as grandfather, if that's understood. And so when you're programmed like that and you grow up, grandfather becomes simply the knowledge of who this person is to you in reference to being a relative. And what makes that so limited and detached is the fact that you've been programmed to not refer to him as grandfather or granddad, grandpops, or anything like that. When he comes around, you see him as Junior. And by him and your mother not having a very good relationship, naturally, whenever there's some dialogue going on with her in reference to him in your environment, it's not gonna be spoken very well of the man's character. And this is done a lot of times, especially in our community. And so when my grandfather would come by, due to the fact that me being programmed not referring to him as grandfather, I didn't have the ability, you might as well say, to have an affection towards him as my grandfather because I was programmed to refer to him as Junior. And by me being around people that were always speaking ill of this man, I come up feeling ill towards him. I felt like he was a threat to me, even though this man never did anything to me. And so as time progressed, I remember questioning my mother about, referring to him as Junior and not grandfather. And she said, no, you are not to call him grandfather. You are to refer to him as Junior. Now, she told me this, I believe I was the age of 11. And so, like I said, when you come up in an environment that is hostile and hostile towards your grandfather, you submit to your mother's wishes. And simply because she doesn't have a healthy relationship with him, you won't, because you're being programmed. And so whenever he would come by to visit my great grandmother, who was his mother, of course, there wouldn't be any excitement like, hey, my granddad's here, So through the years, we didn't develop a common or even close relationship as grandfather and grandson, because there was a psychological and emotional impediment in between that. Now, as I got older, I found out by way of asking a whole bunch of questions, how come my mother and my granddad never get along? I was 9 years old, and my granddad and his third wife, their house was getting some painting done, or some type of repairs. And so my granddad and his new wife, and I believe a couple of my little uncles, had to move in with us. I believe it was like for a week. And so one night, we gave up our bedrooms, and we were sleeping in the living room. Me and my uncles, we were just all sleeping in the living room on the floor. I believe my older sister was there as well. And so my mother was the type of woman, she would run the streets a whole lot. She was out there. I'm not gonna sit here and play with that. Okay, she was just out there. So one night, my mother comes home. I believe it was almost between 12:30 a.m. close to 1 o'clock. This was after the house had already settled down. So due to the fact that the house had already settled down, and she comes in so late, my grandfather had to get up and open up the door for her. So she comes in with a little tight dress on and everything. And so there in the hallway outside my great grandmother's room, in a dispute about her coming home so late. And so they went back and forth arguing. And so my granddad said, in the midst of the argument, "You just like your damn mother." And my mother said, well, she was good enough for you to lay with her. The next thing I heard, my grandfather had struck my mother. Pow! And I heard my mother, she started crying. I get up, this is a instinct of mine. And so I run back there to the hallway. I'm like, what's going on? My granddad looked at me and he pointed back to the living room. He said, "Go on back there and lay down." He said, "This doesn't have anything to do with you." And so I turned around and I went back into the living room and I laid back down. And of course, I was curious of what transpired. And the very next day, and as time went on, no one ever brought that up. What happened that night? It was like the very next day, it was like it didn't even happen. But what I noticed was my grandfather's words, the words that he used. He didn't say, "You just like your mother." He said, "You're just like your damn mother." And what I noticed, the words that he used when he said, "You just like your damn mother," I'm like, whoa. He said, "Damn mother." So that implies a history of discord, strong discord and disappointment and dysfunctional relationship between my grandfather. And obviously, my mother had reflected some of my grandmother's characteristics and her lifestyle and stuff like that. And so as time went on, I had a chance to talk to my grandfather. And I asked him, I'm like, "What happened between you and my grandmother?" And he wasn't able to talk about it. And he told me, he said, "David, I'm only going to say this." He said, "All that I've ever wanted in my life was a woman that loved God and loved me." And I didn't push the issue for him to tell me about my grandmother because my mind reflected back to the lifestyle that my mother was living. And I'm like, well, maybe he's trying to protect me, something like that. And then I saw some pictures of my grandmother and him and my mother sitting on her lap. And see, my grandfather was in the Navy. He was a pilot during World War II. And as a matter of fact, he had got shot down by Germany a couple of times and he survived it. Now, what I noticed on these pictures of him and my grandmother, while he was in his Navy suit, my grandmother looked at very ladylike. She looked at very much wife material. And so she had my mother sit on her lap. Now, after they got divorced, I saw this other picture of my grandmother, and she was sitting in, she was standing next to her, looked like it was a bedroom dresser. And she had on a tight fitting dress. The dresser had a bunch of perfume and looked like it had makeup on it. And she was a beautiful woman. She had very long hair. She was a mixture of Indian and Creole. And but what I noticed about my grandmother, she had, I don't know what they call these, but I'm going to try to give a description of it best way that I can. But she had these lace-looking things that the women back in the day would stick their fingers through, and it would these lace-looking things. And so she wore those. She wore a lot of jewelry and things like that. And to be honest with you, she looked like she worked in a brothel. I mean, I'm just being honest with you. Just being honest with you. And so I always felt like he was trying to protect me by not telling me about my grandmother. And my mother didn't know a lot about my grandmother because my grandmother had passed away when my mother was but 7 years old. She had remarried, and she moved. Cause see, my grandmother on my mother's side, she was from her people come out of Atlanta, but they immigrated from India to Atlanta. So their ancestors on my mother's side, on my grandmother's side of my mother's side, they immigrated to Chicago from India to Atlanta, Georgia. And they had got from what I was told, I don't know how true this is. They had mingled with some of the British people out there in Atlanta, and it had gotten to the point where my grandmother just didn't want to live in Atlanta no more, so she moved to Chicago, and this is how she met my grandfather. But through her second marriage, she met a guy from Chicago. She caught tuberculosis, and she passed away at the young age of 27 years old. She died very young. And so she was 27 and my mother was just 7 years old. So my mother didn't really know a lot about her mother. So there was a lot going on in that area. But all I know is that my granddad saw a lot of my grandmother, Murtis. Her name was Murtis Harper. So he saw a lot of Murtis in my mother. And what I've noticed about my mother, my oldest sister, they have this this way about themselves to where most people would deem them as not being too ladylike. You know, because my mother was out there in the entertainment field. You know, she went out with a whole lot of singers like Smokey Robinson, and she had a long relationship with the late comedian Flip Wilson, rest in peace. Beautiful, beautiful man, beautiful personality, very nice to me, because they were on the road for a long time, and it had gotten to the point to where they needed to take a rest, and so they stayed with us for up to 4 months in Chicago, and that way I had the chance to meet Flip Wilson, got to know Flip Wilson. He was very generous to me. As a matter of fact, the first time that I met Mr. Wilson, I'm not going to disrespect him and call him Flip, because he was more than that to me. But, you know, the first time I met Mr. Wilson, obviously my mother told him how much I loved classical music, and so he gave me a big stack of albums that had a diverse collection of a whole lot of different types of music, from classical music to jazz. He was a nice man, rest in peace. But what it is that because of all of those things, and by me not being able to address my grandfather as grandfather, what a lot of people don't understand is that not being able to call your grandfather, that does a lot of damage, you know, and to put some type of impediment in between something like that because you and that other person didn't get along, because my mother had asserted that he didn't show her a whole lot of affection. Okay, fine, that's between you and him. You know, that has nothing to do with me. It has nothing to do with me. Now, people may say that's selfish. I don't care what you call it. It doesn't have anything to do with me. You know? And so, because of the way that they got along, it had affected my relationship with him. And I could tell a lot of times that he wanted to get to know me and I wanted to get to know him on the basis of grandfather and grandson, but that never transpired. And so that has an effect on you. And what that does, that prevents you from becoming close, growing to have an emotional and psychological connection with your grandfather or any other relative in your family because of the discompatibilities that that particular family member had with another family member. And so as time went on, I moved to Las Vegas, and wow, let me see. The last time that I saw my grandfather in person was back in 1982. And I'm not accurate now, but I think that my grandfather had passed away in 2008. And when my great-grandmother had passed, my family had went, a lot of people went in different directions, you know, they went in different directions. And so I ended up going to Atterbury Job Corps Center in Edinburgh, Indiana. And then from there, I went back to Chicago for a little while. And my mother had inherited a lot of money from my wealthy uncle, Miron Harper, who lived in California. So she had to move to California to take care of that. Now, when I got out of Atterbury Job Corps, I went back home to Chicago, I believe it was like for a month. And then she moved me out to California. But, and from that, you know, there I went to another Job Corps center. And, excuse me. Turn my phone off. I went to another Job Corps center in Sierra, Nevada. And that's where I met the mother of my two sons. But I'm going through a lot. You know, I'm going through a lot. But I'm going to get back to the primary point that I need to make. So and then from the Atterbury Job Corps, from Sierra Nevada Job Corps, I moved to Las Vegas, 1987, November the 22nd, 1987. And I've been here for that long, opposite of the year and a half that I spent in Atlanta, Georgia. But the way that I found out that my grandfather had passed was on Facebook, believe it or not. because the family had become so dysfunctional. When my grandfather had passed, I didn't even know he had passed. But I had a feeling that he was no longer with us by, of course, the influence of so long ago. I figured, well, he's probably passed away by now. But what confirmed that is when I was searching for my uncles. And so I put in Gerald Anthony Kelly, and who was the oldest son of his third wife. And so when I was, I sent him a friend request. And so when I was going through his pictures, I saw a picture of my grandfather. And it had Gerald saying, "Rest in peace." And so I sent him my phone number, and him and I talked. And I had explained to him why I wasn't there because I had no idea and how to get in touch with him. And my Uncle Gerald, my little Uncle Gerald, you might as well say, he had told me that my granddad wanted to contact me before he passed away. But, my granddad had passed away by way of Alzheimer's. And so my Uncle Gerald told me that out of all of his kids, he was the only one that he had recognized before he had passed away. But as time went on, I was working at the Rio Casino out here back in the kitchen. And so there's a singer called Bill Withers. And a lot of you people of my generation knows exactly what I'm talking about. As a matter of fact, some of the younger people may know who he is because he created the song "Lean on Me," which is of the movie that Morgan Freeman did, the movie "Lean on Me." So if you don't know who Bill Withers is, just look him up. And so it's something about Bill Withers' voice that used to always have me think of my granddad. And so while I was at work one night, my favorite Bill Withers song had came on, and it was "Lovely Day." And as I'm listening to this song, my mind reflected back to the pictures that I observed on my Uncle Gerald's Facebook. And a lot of the pictures that I saw of my grandfather, he showed a lot of physical affection towards all of them, which I think is a beautiful thing. It's beautiful. And so instead of responding like a whole lot of people fall victim to responding when you observe these type of pictures, which means that some people will become envious or jealous of, other family members who were privileged to have these times with a person like that. I didn't become that way, but what struck me, this was, let me see, I believe it was 3:14 in the morning because I was working the graveyard shift from 12 a.m. to 8 a.m. Suddenly, it hit me while I was listening to that song. It hit me that I never hugged my grandfather. And that hit me like a ton of bricks because this beautiful man was in my life, all of my life. And never once did I ever hug my grandfather. You know, I'm thinking, where are my pictures with me hugging my grandfather? This man has been in my life, all of my life. And I never hugged just. And you know, that hit me like a ton of bricks. And so I broke down at my job. And so I immediately called my Uncle Gerald. And when I called him, he could tell that I was upset. And he immediately said, David, what's wrong? And I told him, I said, you know, I never hugged him. And he said, what do you mean? I said, Gerald, I was looking at all of the pictures in your Facebook. And I said, you know, it hit me that I never hugged that man, not one time, not in my life. I said, because of all of the drama that was going on between him and my mother, and her programming me not to call him my grandfather. I said, until this moment, this very moment, I understand the damage that was done to my mind when I was programmed not to refer to him as grandfather. I said, now I know how much damage that did to us. I said, and that's a terrible, evil, and demonic way to take something away from your child as something so beautiful, you know, like an opportunity to have a very loving and close relationship with your grandfather, for your grandfather to be able to come over and you're in your room and he comes in the door and you hear his voice. And instead of me saying, "Ooh, my granddad's here," and so I run out, didn't hug my grandfather. I was programmed, I was influenced to think and feel that he was a threat to me because others around me felt that he was a threat because of their relationship with him. So due to the fact that I was raised up to think and to feel that this man was a threat, I was raised up to think that he was a threat to me, and the man never in his life did anything to me. The man never even raised his voice at me. He never did anything to me, never disrespected me. He never raised his voice at me. He never put his hands on me. And even when I tell my mother, he never put his hands on me, of course, the black woman got to jump in and because if he would have put his hands on you, blah, 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 I want to hear that bullshit. Okay. Because you wouldn't have did a damn thing. All right. Because that's my grandfather. And if I was to have did anything out of line to where he felt justified in laying hands on me, he would have had that right to do so because that was my grandfather, you know. So I bring all of this up. I went through all of that to bring all of this up. Is that when you bump into situations like what my previous video was talking about, my brother Derek in Atlanta with the extra child whose father is not around. And when he was telling me that when he would leave the kid behind, he wasn't comfortable with doing that. He felt like he should have brought the kid with him. And so when you don't execute the right thing by way of what's in your heart, then others suffer, the kids suffer. What's going on in the mind, as I said before, is between you and that other individual that eventually you're going to have to resolve your differences, because regardless of what you had or didn't have with that particular person, peace still has to abide. And the only way that peace is going to be able to abide, you both have to be willing to come together and resolve your differences. Now, my grandfather is not innocent, because he was so disappointed in my grandmother of my mother's side. It contaminated his relationship with my mother, because my mother she had reflected some of the same characteristics that my grandmother, Murtis Harper, reflected. But his mistake was due to the fact that he didn't resolve his differences with my grandmother, even after they separated and they decided to go their separate ways. See, when things are left unresolved, that's like having a wound that is open and bleeding, and you decide not to attend to it. You know, it's just going to keep bleeding. And soon there's going to be an infection. And through the infection, it's going to cause an effect. Now, due to the fact that those two never resolved their differences, you know, and due to the fact that they never really sat down and talked about why their relationship was not the way that it should have been, it affected me and affected others around them. And so, because of them not resolving their differences, I had to find out that my grandfather had passed away by way of Facebook. So what you don't resolve is going to affect the children. It's always going to affect the children. And so this is why I was saying earlier, do what is in your heart. Now, regardless of how my mother and my grandfather didn't get along, she had no right to tell me not to address him as grandfather. Now, it had gotten to a point to where I started calling him Gramps. And I will never forget the look on his face. See, because me and my grandfather are we're not even twins, we're clones. You know, we're practically clones, you might as well say. So we look so much alike, it's kind of eerie, you know, because when my Uncle Gerald talks to me, sometimes he tells me, man, you look so much like him. And you know, when him and his ex-wife came out here to visit, and we were all at a restaurant eating, I noticed how my Uncle Gerald just kept looking over at me, shaking his head. He said, you look so much like him. It's incredible how much you look like him. And you know, I can understand that, you know. But because of them having unresolved issues, it affected him and our relationship. But when I called him Gramps, he looked at me And he smiled. And that's when we started developing almost a good communication. But then not too long after that, my great grandmother had passed. And like I said before, when she passed away, the family, everybody broke up and went in their other different directions. And the mistake that we made as a family in Chicago was that we had so many unresolved issues going on in Chicago. And my great grandmother, Rebecca Kelly, her name was Rebecca Kelly. When she passed away, it had impacted my family in such a way that everybody, it was like shattering a window. Everybody just went in different directions. And nobody ever, the elders didn't take the responsibility of getting everyone together to talk about how her death affected all of us. So, whenever there's a major death in the family, instead of everyone going in their different directions, I would advise a lot of families out here to sit down and talk about how this particular death had affected them, and to work on the family remaining together and how we're going to move forward without this primary figure who kept the family together that is no longer with us. We never did that. And so due to the fact that him and my mother didn't do what was right in their hearts, and they were too caught up in the conflicts that was in the minds and everything, it affected other areas like me. And so to the brothers who didn't understand, and I think it was a couple of sisters who didn't understand, you have to understand the impact that has on a child. You have to understand the impact that's going to have on a child. And so when I told Derek to just do what's in your heart, and he decided to do just that, what's in his heart, because what's going on, or what went on between the little guy's mother and the other guy who got her pregnant, didn't have anything to do with him. Nothing. He's just a kid. He's just trying to live his life. And so when he sees his sister, I won't say stepsister, but when he sees his sister leaving with her father, he's like, what about me? And so to maintain him not feeling left out or hurt or abandoned or anything like that, just do what is best in your heart. And so I just wanted to put this together right quick to help a lot of people understand, regardless of all of the conflict and the discompatibilities and the drama and the dysfunctions and all of that, we have to keep in mind on how all of this is going to affect children, the younger generation. So it's like an open wound, like I was saying earlier, that's consistently bleeding. It's consistently bleeding. Sooner or later, someone is going to have to attend to that wound so that wound can heal. And from that healing, you move forward. And of course, you look back like any wound on your body. There's a scar there. And that scar represents the experience. It represents the experience. And so you move forward and you learn from the experience, and you learn how to move forward and how not to repeat the same cycle. And so what I think my brother Derek is doing, I think it's a beautiful thing for this young man to bring him on board, you know, and be that father figure to him. Now, even if his dad decides to come around, I was telling Derek to don't hold any animosity towards him. It's up to you guys. Don't hold any animosity towards him, because even that's going to affect this young man, and it's going to affect your daughter as well, because of the environment that's going around. You know, it's just hostile. So, you know how a lot of our people always say, we're grown, we're grown. Yeah, but we have to understand exactly what grown means. Grown means you're 21 years old and you're legally considered grown. But the distinction of being grown and an adult is a big distinction with that. You know, you're grown man and woman when you're 21. It means you're legal. You're legal. But it doesn't imply that you're an adult. An adult, becoming an adult implies being mature, being able to handle things and respond to things adequately in all of your challenges. You know, so that's what being an adult means. It's just being responsible and being productive, being intelligent, and being all of the good qualities in which creates a person who is productive in society, responsible in society. Because, you know, we have a lot of people. I mean, I know some people that are close to 70 years old. They're grown, but they're still not adults, because they haven't reached that level of maturity yet. And sometimes a lot of their intellectual habits prevents them ever reaching that status of intellectual maturity. And a lot of times it's not even their faults. A whole lot of times it has everything to do with the environment. It has a lot to do with the environment. But I don't want to hold you too long. But I just wanted to address that, because I felt like it's very important. And I would encourage even the brothers and the couple of sisters who didn't agree. That's fine. I mean, you shouldn't agree with everything I say. You shouldn't, you know, because you're an individual, and I'm not here promoting myself as a teacher or a leader or anything like that. I mean, we're all in this life experience together. You know, we're all in this life experience together. And if I feel as though you misunderstood something that I said, or if I didn't explain it to you clearly enough, then you're responsible to bringing that to my attention. And if I feel as though you misunderstood what I said, I'm not going to make a video. I'm not going to attack you. I'm just going to explain it a little bit more objectively so that you can see my point. And you're either going to do two things. You're either going to accept my conclusion of it, or you're not going to accept it. You're going to move on. But I'm not going to go back and forth and argue with you. I'm just going to give you my take on it based upon how I see it and my life experience and everything. And I'm just going to move forward from that. But I would suggest that we take care of our youth and not only physically and doing the things that we're supposed to do domestically, as far as feeding, clothing and everything, but we have to be very responsible of how we speak things in the environment. Because not too long ago, I had my son's mother and both of my sons staying with me for a little while, and because she had lost her place, and she was waiting for her other place to get ready so that they can move. And for some reason, this woman has a anger and hatred towards me, which is her problem, because I don't care. I used to wonder about it, but why would you wonder about why does she hate me? Well, did you mess around on her? No. Did you mistreat her? No. Did you call her out her name? No. She's the one with the problems, not you. If you can't think of anything that provoked her to feel this way towards you, why insult your own intelligence and still asking why? Why? There is no why. You haven't done anything. She's the one who caused all of the confusion. But when they were staying with me, my oldest son is a taco genius. I call him genius anyway, because it seems like anything he gives his mind to, he's brilliant at it. But my oldest son, he used to like to fix my plate all the time because he just wanted to honor his father. That's it. That's all he wanted. And plus, he was very proud of the way that he made tacos. And so I'm sitting in the living room, and we were all in there looking at a movie, and I overheard her say, while he was fixing my plate, he said, "You don't have to fix his plate. You let that nigga fix his own plate." Now, I'm hearing this from the living room. So now I'm supposed to get up and go in the kitchen and like, "What you say to him?" But by me not being a very emotional person, and by me knowing her so well, why should I expect anything less from her? See, when you know someone and they say something like that, the only reason why you would react inadequately is if you were surprised of this person's character. But by this being who and what she is, it didn't surprise me. Of course, I didn't like it, because I felt like it was disrespectful for her to say something like that to my son, and it helped, and it made me think of my mother telling me that I can't address my grandfather as my grandfather. So it's like my mother was telling me, you can't honor your grandfather as a grandfather. And so when I heard her tell my son, you don't have to fix his plate, you let him fix his own plate, that was her way of telling my son, you don't have to honor him as your father. So I'm not going to get further into that subject, because I feel like I've held you long enough. But let us understand the importance of environment when it comes to our children. Let us understand the importance of knowing that the children had absolutely nothing to do with the conflicts with us as adults. I don't feel that the children should have to suffer behind that. And so that's why I was telling my brother Derek, just do what's in your heart, man. Just do what's in your heart. Because instinctively, one of the reasons why he was feeling uncomfortable is because he's got a beautiful heart. And so when you go against the beauty of your own heart, you're going to grieve the beauty of your own heart. And that grief is going to transmit to your mind a question, and that question is going to have an instinct in it that's going to question, how come you didn't take this child with you when you in your heart wanted to? And of course, the mind is going to say, well, that's not my kid. It's not my kid. All children are your children. It's not intellectual. The intellect that is based upon a past that is rooted in conflict. Always do what's right in your heart, regardless of the circumstances. And so, with all of that being said, I'm pretty certain I left some things out, but I feel like, like I said, I feel like I've held you long enough. So I'm just going to cut this off by saying, always keep in mind on what affects the children and how it's going to affect their relationship when they become adults and they move forward. Whatever open wounds that you have in your life with particular family members or even friends or whatever area in your life to attend to, then attend to it. Attend to it. It's not going to kill you to heal matters in your life, because like I said in those other videos about the woman that I moved to Georgia to be with, Salam Yilma, I wrote her an email, giving her the opportunity for us to resolve our differences, and I didn't hear back from her. And so because of that, I let it go. All you can do is do your part, and if someone doesn't want to collaborate with you in order to heal the situation, then what you do is you let it go, and you leave all of that other hatred and animosity and whatever they want to invest in it. Just leave that with them, and you let it go. You let it go, and you move forward. So, with all of that being said, like I always say, I hope that everyone have a good night, and I hope that someone got something out of what I presented to you. And just keep in mind, like I say, about how everything affects the youth in our life. And stay human, and everyone have a blessed night and be productive. Stay human. Okay? Peace.